The cabin air was thick with the scent of old cedar, and my own sleeplessness when the voices pulled me from the shallow edge of dreams. For in the morning, the kind of hour when the world feels suspended between yesterday's failures and tomorrow's uncertainties, I'd been lying there for what felt like hours, listening to the mountain silence that had become both my refuge and my prison. The floorboards beneath my bare feet were cold as I crept to the window, my 62-year-old joints protesting with each careful step. Through the frosted glass, I could see two figures moving like shadows across the lot next door. The empty plot that Cody and I had bought 15 years ago, back when we still believed in forever. Back when we thought our children would want to build memories here, not just claim their inheritance. My daughter Dwayne's voice carried on the thin mountain air, sharp with the authority she'd inherited from her father and refined through 20 years of corporate law. Even in whispers, she commanded, "Deeper, Oscar. It has to be deeper." Her husband's response was lost in the scraping of metal against frozen earth. But I could see his shoulders working, see the steam of his breath in the cold air. Oscar, who charmed his way into our family with his easy smile and investment banker credentials, now looked like a common gravedigger in the pale pre-dawn light. I pressed closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass. What were they burying? And why here? On land that technically belonged to the estate? Land they'd been so eager to talk about selling. The metal box they lowered into the hole was small, maybe the size of a jewelry case. Dwayne knelt beside the disturbed earth, her movements reverent in a way that made my chest tighten. She said something I couldn't hear, her hand resting on the freshly turned soil like a benediction. They worked quickly after that, replacing the earth, scattering leaves and pine needles with practiced efficiency. I remained frozen at the window until their headlights disappeared down the winding mountain road, leaving me alone with questions that tasted like betrayal and the kind of cold that had nothing to do with the October morning. To understand the ice in my veins at that moment, you have to understand the fog I'd been living in for the past 2 months. Ever since Cody's heart finally gave out, my world had shrunk to the 4 walls of this cabin. Cody had been my rock, my compass, my everything for 38 years. He handled the finances, the repairs, the big decisions. I handled the home, the garden, the quiet comforts of our life together. It was a partnership that worked for us. But without him, I was adrift in a sea of paperwork and responsibilities I didn't understand. The grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making every breath an effort. Days blurred into one another, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun over the Blue Ridge Mountains. That was when Dwayne swept in. She arrived a week after the funeral, her silver BMW crunching on the gravel driveway. She stepped out of the car not like a grieving daughter, but like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover. She wore a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled, her expression a mask of competent sympathy. "Mom, you can't handle this alone," she'd said, her arms wrapping around me in a hug that felt more like an assessment than an embrace. "Don't you worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything." And I, drowning in sorrow, clung to her words like a life raft. I was grateful, so deeply, achingly grateful. She was my daughter, Cody's daughter. She was smart, capable. Of course she would take care of me. The first stack of papers appeared a few days later. Dwayne spread them across the old oak kitchen table, the same table where Cody and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd planned our future, where I now sat alone. "This is just standard procedure, Mom," she said, her voice smooth and reassuring. She pointed to a signature line with a gold-plated pen. "This gives me power of attorney. It just means I can pay the bills, talk to the bank, and manage the estate accounts for you. It'll save you so much stress." I looked at the dense blocks of legal text. The words swam before my tear-filled eyes. I saw phrases like fiduciary duty and asset management, but they meant nothing to me. All I understood was that my daughter was here to help. My head ached with a grief so profound that the thought of reading a utility bill felt like climbing a mountain. Of course. Honey. I whispered, my voice hoarse. I took the pen and signed where she pointed. I signed a dozen more pages that afternoon, my hand moving automatically, my trust absolute. Dwayne neatly gathered the documents, slid them into her leather briefcase, and snapped it shut. The sound echoed in the quiet cabin like a closing door. There, she said, patting my hand. All done. Now you just focus on resting. In the weeks that followed, Dwayne's version of helping took on a life of its own. She and Oscar would drive up from Charlotte on weekends, their car filled with empty boxes and cleaning supplies. They called it decluttering. We need to sort through Dad's things, Dwayne would announce, her tone leaving no room for argument. It's not healthy for you to live surrounded by all this. I didn't want to sort through anything. Every object held a memory, a piece of Cody I wasn't ready to let go of. His worn flannel shirt still hanging on the back of the bedroom door, smelling faintly of sawdust and him. His collection of fly fishing lures in the den. His half-finished crossword puzzle on the nightstand. But I was too weak to protest. I would sit in Cody's armchair, a silent ghost in my own home, while they moved around me with brisk, efficient energy, sorting my life into boxes labeled keep, donate, and trash. One afternoon, a wave of panic washed over me. I'd been looking for Cody's old watch, a simple Timex with a worn leather band. It wasn't valuable, but it was the watch he'd worn every day. The last time I'd seen it, it was on his dresser. Now, it was gone. Dwayne, have you seen your father's watch? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She didn't even look up from the box of old financial records she was taping shut. The Timex? I think I packed it in one of the keepsakes boxes. Mom, don't worry. It'll turn up when we go through everything properly. Her voice was dismissive, as if my concern was a childish distraction. But I wanted to. I just wanted to hold it. I said, my voice small. She finally looked at me then, her expression softening into one of practiced patience, the kind a doctor uses on a confused patient. Mom, you're just overwhelmed. Your memory is probably a little foggy right now. It's completely normal. Let me and Oscar handle this. We know what we're doing. Her words were meant to be comforting, but they planted a small, cold seed of doubt in my heart. Was my memory failing? Was I becoming the helpless, confused old woman she seemed to think I was? I sank back into the chair and said nothing more. The isolation grew subtly, almost without me noticing. My best friend, Carol, who had lived down the road before moving to Florida, called one Tuesday afternoon. I heard the phone ring in the kitchen, and a flicker of warmth spread through me at the thought of hearing her voice. But before I could get up, I heard Dwayne answer it. She must have come in without me hearing. Her voice was sweet as honey. Oh, hi Carol. It's Dwayne. Yet, she's doing as well as can be expected. Oh, that's so sweet of you. But she's really not up for visitors or even long phone calls right now. The doctor wants her to rest completely. It's all just been too much for her. Yet, of course, I'll be sure to tell her you called. I stood in the doorway of the living room, frozen. I hadn't seen a doctor. I wasn't on bed rest. I was just sad and lonely. So terribly lonely. The thought of talking to Carol felt like a ray of sunshine in a dark room. And Dwayne had just pulled the curtains shut. When she hung up, she turned and saw me. For a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes' annoyance. Maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual look of calm concern. That was Carol, she said brightly, sending her love. I told her you were resting and that you'd call her back when you feel up to it. I feel up to it now, I said, the words barely a whisper. Dwayne walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt heavy. Mom, you think you do? But you'd be exhausted after 5 minutes. Trust me. I'm just trying to protect you. You need to conserve your energy. Again. I relented. She was a lawyer. She was my daughter. She knew best. I allowed her to guide me back to the armchair, to tuck a blanket around my legs, to treat me like a fragile piece of glass. I let her cut me off from the world, one phone call, one canceled visit at a time, until the only voices I heard were hers and Oscar's. The silence of the mountain, once a source of peace for Cody and me, started to feel oppressive. The wind whistling through the pines sounded like whispers I couldn't quite understand. The creaks and groans of the old cabin at night began to sound like footsteps. I was alone, adrift, and increasingly unsure of my own mind. I started to believe their narrative that I was fragile, confused, incapable. And then, one Thursday afternoon, a man in a crisp suit appeared at the door. Dwayne was with him. "Mom, this is Mr. Gable," she announced, ushering him inside. "He's a real estate appraiser. We just need to get a formal valuation of the property for the estate paperwork. It's a tax thing. He'll just need to look around for a bit." The man, Mr. Gable, smiled a slick, professional smile. But he didn't act like an appraiser. He walked through the rooms talking about market comps and curb appeal. He looked out the picture window at the lake view and murmured, "This is the money shot. A property like this won't stay on the market for long." On the market? My heart gave a painful lurch. I pulled Dwayne aside into the kitchen. "What is he talking about? On the market? You said this was for taxes." Dwayne's smile was tight, her patience clearly wearing thin. "It is, Mom. But we have to be practical. This is a huge property for one person to manage. The upkeep, the taxes, it's a lot. We're just exploring all the options to ensure your financial security for the future." "My future is here," I said, my voice rising with a panic I hadn't felt in months. "In this house. Your father built this deck with his own hands. And it was wonderful," she said, her voice dropping to a placating whisper. "But Dad's gone. And you can't live in the past. We have to think about what's best for you now." Her words hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just talking about selling a house. She was talking about erasing my life with Cody, about packaging up my past and selling it to the highest bidder. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The real estate agent's words echoed in my head, mixing with Dwayne's smooth justifications. The seed of doubt that had been planted weeks ago began to sprout, its roots twisting around my heart. Something was terribly wrong. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it in the cold, silent air of the cabin. It was that feeling, that deep, gut-wrenching certainty of betrayal, that had me wide awake at 4 a.m. It's what drove me to the window, just in time to see the scraping of a shovel against frozen earth, and the dark shape of a metal box disappearing into the ground. I waited until the red glow of their taillights was swallowed by the mountain darkness, my forehead pressed against the cold window pane. The silence they left behind was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the scraping sound of the shovel and the image of that small, metal box. I stood there, trembling, not from the cold, but from the chilling certainty that the fog of grief had finally lifted, revealing a landscape of calculated deceit. I didn't go back to bed. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford. Instead, I put on a pot of coffee, my hands shaking so badly that the ground spilled across the counter. The familiar ritual, usually a source of comfort, felt alien. I was a stranger in my own kitchen, in my own life. Every justification Dwayne had ever offered me paraded through my mind, each one now stripped of its comforting disguise. "It's just for the taxes. Mom, we're just protecting you. You're confused." I saw it all now, not as acts of love, but as moves in a game I didn't even know I was playing. She hadn't been managing my grief. She had been exploiting it. The sun was just beginning to cast a pale, gray light over the peaks when I pulled on Cody's old work boots. They were 2 sizes too big, but slipping my feet into them felt like borrowing a piece of his strength. From the tool shed, a place that smelled of earth and oil and him, I took a shovel. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands, not just with its physical weight, but with the weight of what I was about to do. Digging for a secret buried by my own daughter. The 50 yards to the neighboring lot felt like a mile. Each step was a battle against the part of me that wanted to turn back, to retreat into the comforting ignorance of the past 2 months. The mother in me screamed in protest, desperate to believe there was a reasonable explanation, a misunderstanding. But the woman standing at the window at 4 a.m. knew better. The disturbed earth was easy to find. Dwayne, for all her meticulous planning in the boardroom, had no experience with hiding things in the woods. The patch of loose soil and scattered leaves stood out like a fresh wound on the forest floor. I hesitated for only a moment, the shovel hovering over the spot. Then I plunged it into the earth. The work was hard. The ground was cold and packed, and my arms, softened by months of inactivity and sorrow, ached with the effort. With every shovelful of dirt, I felt like I was excavating the wreckage of my own heart. I wasn't just digging for a box. I was digging for the truth. 20 minutes later, the shovel struck something with a dull, metallic thud. My breath caught in my throat. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the damp cold seeping through my jeans, and clawed at the remaining dirt with my bare hands. My fingers, numb and stiff, finally closed around the cold, hard edges of a safety deposit box. It was small, unremarkable, the kind Cody kept at the bank in town. The lock was damaged, clearly forced open and then pressed shut again. My hand shook as I worked the lid open. It wasn't locked anymore. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded blue velvet, was my grandmother's ring. The Art Deco diamond, flanked by sapphires, piece of my family history. I had worn it every day for 20 years, until arthritis had made my knuckles swell. The ring I'd last seen in the jewelry box on my dresser. The ring that had gone missing about a month ago, during one of Dwayne and Oscar's decluttering weekends. I lifted it out, the metal cold against my skin. The stones glittered dimly in the weak morning light. My vision blurred. It wasn't just a ring. It was a symbol of a life, of a history they had tried to bury. Beneath where the ring had been, wrapped in a piece of yellowed tissue paper, were my mother's pearls. The single strand Cody had bought for me on our 25th anniversary. He had saved for a year to buy them. I had only worn them on special occasions, terrified of losing them. They, too, had vanished from my jewelry box. Dwayne had helped me search for them, her face a mask of concern. They'll turn up, Mom. She'd promised. We'll find them. She knew where they were all along. My hand trembled as I reached deeper into the box. At the very bottom lay a small manila envelope. My name, Heather Patterson, was written on the front in Cody's familiar, steady handwriting. My fingers felt clumsy as I tore it open. Inside were the deeds. The original, official deeds to the cabin and the adjoining lot where I was now kneeling. The very documents Dwayne had told me were safely filed with her lawyer in Charlotte. The ownership fully and legally transferred to her and Oscar to simplify the estate. I remembered signing the papers she'd put in front of me. The ones she said were for tax purposes. Had I signed away my home? My life? A sound tore from my throat, raw and animalistic. It was the sound of 38 years of trust shattering into a million pieces. The sound of a mother's heart breaking, not from grief, but from the brutal, calculated betrayal of her own child. A pair of ravens took flight from a nearby pine, their harsh cries echoing my own. I knelt there in the dirt, surrounded by the unearthed pieces of my life, and I felt something shift deep inside me. The soft, pliable grief that had defined me for months began to harden, to crystallize into something sharp and cold and clear. Rage. It was a clean, purifying fire, burning away the fog of sorrow and confusion. Dwayne had always been ruthless. I'd seen it in her career. The way she could dismantle an opponent in court with cold logic. Cody used to worry about it. She's too aggressive, he'd say. She doesn't know where the line is. I had always defended her, proud of her strength, her ambition. I never imagined that ruthlessness would one day be turned on me. I never imagined the daughter who cried when her pet hamster died would grow into a woman who could steal from her own mother and bury the evidence like a common criminal. Carefully, reverently, I gathered the items. The ring, pearls, the deeds. They were no longer just possessions. They were evidence. They were my weapons. I placed them back in the metal box and carried it, like a shield, back to the cabin. The morning sun was finally breaking through the trees, its light slanting across the porch. As I climbed the steps, the house felt different. It was no longer a prison of grief. It was my fortress, and I was no longer its prisoner. I was its defender. Inside, the phone began to ring. Its shrill sound an intrusion into my newfound clarity. I walked over and looked at the caller ID. Dwayne. I let it ring. 1 ring. 2. 3. I pictured her in her pristine Charlotte office, tapping her pen impatiently, wondering why her compliant, grieving mother wasn't answering. With each ring that went unanswered, I felt a piece of my power return. The silence that followed when the ringing stopped was the most satisfying sound I had heard in months. I set the box on the kitchen table, arranging the contents like a prosecutor laying out evidence for a jury. The ring, the pearls, the deeds. In the bright morning light, their meaning was undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a systematic campaign of theft, executed under the cover of love. How long had she been planning this? Had every hug, every word of comfort, been a lie? Every trip up the mountain to help me had been a reconnaissance mission, cataloging my life for liquidation. The phone rang again. Dwayne. I let it go to voicemail. Let her wonder. Let her feel a fraction of the uncertainty and fear I had been living with. I made coffee. My hands perfectly steady now. I sat at the table and looked at my reflection in the dark liquid. The woman staring back was not the same one who had woken up this morning. The soft lines of sorrow around my eyes had been sharpened by anger. There was a hardness there now. A glint of winter ice. An hour later, I heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway, moving too fast. Dwayne's silver BMW. She was alone. I watched from the window as she got out, slamming the door. She marched to the front door and knocked. A sharp, impatient rap. I didn't move. Mom? Her voice, muffled by the door, was laced with an artificial brightness that set my teeth on edge. Mom, I know you're in there. I've been calling. We need to talk. We, as if we were partners in this. She tried the doorknob. Locked. I heard her muttering to herself, frustrated. Then, a scraping sound. She was using her key, the one I gave her for emergencies. The irony was bitter. The door swung open, and she strode in, radiating an aura of ownership. She was dressed for a day in Corda navy blue power suit, sharp heels that clicked on the wooden floor. She stopped short when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. Her eyes, which had been sweeping the room with proprietary confidence, fell upon the items laid out before me. The mask of composure slipped. For a single, unguarded second, I saw panic in her eyes. Pure, unadulterated panic. Then, just as quickly, the lawyer took over. Her face became a careful blank. Oh, she said, the single word hanging in the air between us. I can explain. Can you? My voice was unnervingly calm, devoid of the hysteria she was likely expecting. Because I am genuinely curious. I'd love to hear the explanation for stealing your mother's heirlooms and the deeds to her home, and then burying them in the woods. Her composure cracked again. Just a little. A faint flush crept up her neck. She had arguments prepared for a confused, grieving woman. She did not have them prepared for this cold, clear-eyed stranger sitting in her mother's chair. It's not stealing, Mom. Technically, she began, her voice regaining its smooth, persuasive cadence. Everything is part of the estate. Oscar and I were just securing the most valuable items until the probate process is finalized. We were worried they might get lost. Secure. I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. You call burying them in a hole in the ground secure? It was temporary. We were going to put them in a proper safe deposit box in the city. We were going to tell you. Were you? I interrupted, and the sharpness in my own voice surprised even me. Were you going to tell me before, or after your real estate agent sold my home out from under me? The color drained from her face. That she hadn't expected. She thought the visit from Mr. Gable had been a success. Another step in her plan to gently nudge me toward the outcome she desired. She had no idea it had been the final alarm bell. That was just an appraisal. She stammered, recovering quickly. For tax purposes. I told you. He talked about curb appeal. Dwayne. He talked about how quickly the property would sell. Appraisers value things. They don't plan marketing strategies. I stood up slowly. Deliberately. She took an involuntary step back. A small but significant retreat. And what about the bank accounts? I continued. My voice low and steady. Each word a carefully placed stone building a wall between us. What about Dad's life insurance policy? The one that was supposed to ensure I could live here for the rest of my life without financial worry. This time, she went pale. Truly pale. Her perfectly applied lipstick stood out starkly against her colorless skin. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had believed I was so submerged in grief that I would never look at a bank statement, never question the numbers. She had used my love for her father as a shield while she plundered his legacy. That money is for estate expenses. She finally managed. But her voice was thin, brittle. Funeral costs. Legal fees. $47,000 for a funeral? I countered. The number sharp and precise. I'd spent the last hour online. Not just grieving, but investigating. For a man who was cremated, as he requested, and had a small memorial service with sandwiches from the local deli? Where did the rest of it go? Dwayne. Her carefully constructed world of lies was crumbling, and she was standing in the rubble. She had underestimated me. She had seen a fragile old woman, and in doing so, she had missed the core of steel that Cody's love had forged in me over 38 years. He had protected me, but he had also made me strong. And she was about to find out just how strong I could be. Dwayne's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. She looked like a fish pulled from the water, gasping for air in a world that no longer made sense. Her entire case, the one she'd been building against me in her own mind for months, had just been dismantled by a single, undeniable fact. I knew. But the fighter in her, the ruthless corporate lawyer, wasn't done yet. I saw the moment she regrouped. The shock in her eyes was replaced by a cold fury. The mask of concerned daughter fell away completely, revealing the contempt that had been festering underneath all along. Because you can't take care of yourself. The words exploded out of her. Sharp and venomous. Because you're 62 years old and you've never balanced a checkbook in your life. Because Dad handled everything. And he left you completely unprepared for the real world. Someone has to be the adult here, Mom. And it's obviously not going to be you. The cruelty was breathtaking in its precision. Each word was a poison dart, aimed at my deepest insecurities. She was right. Of course. Cody had handled the finances. He enjoyed it. And I trusted him. I had never seen that as a weakness. I had seen it as a partnership. But in Dwayne's hands, Our life together was twisted into a narrative of my incompetence. My trust was reframed as ignorance. My grief, a disability. Instead of shattering me, her attack had the opposite effect. The cold rage inside me solidified into a wall of unbreakable calm. I see, I said, my voice steady. So all of this, the lies, the theft, the buried jewelry, it was all an act of mercy? You were stealing from me for my own good. How incredibly generous. I'm trying to protect the assets, she insisted, her voice rising. Protect them from you. Do you have any idea what the capital gains tax would be if you sold this place incorrectly? Do you even know what an escrow account is? You would be bankrupt in 6 months, left with nothing. I'm trying to save you from yourself. Like you tried to save me from the conversation I wanted to have with Carol? I asked quietly. Like you saved me the trouble of keeping my own mother's pearls? You're not protecting me, Dwayne. You're caging me. I took a step toward her. And for the first time in her life, my daughter looked at me with something that resembled fear. I picked up the property deeds from the table. Holding them up, they felt solid, real, a tangible piece of the truth. You know, I was looking at these this morning, really looking at them, for the first time, and I noticed the date they were signed over. 3 years ago, when Dad's heart first started acting up. I watched her face, saw the flicker of calculation. You convinced him it was for tax purposes. I continued. You told him it would make things easier for me when he was gone. He trusted you. I trusted you. But you didn't do it to help me. You did it because you saw an opportunity. You saw his illness not as a tragedy, but as the start of a long-term investment plan. This is insane, she whispered, shaking her head. You're twisting everything. Am I? I moved to the kitchen counter, my back to her for a moment. I opened the cookie jar where Cody always kept a small stash of emergency cash. It was empty. Another small theft. Insignificant compared to the rest. But it felt deeply personal. You think I'm incompetent, confused, grieving old woman who needs her brilliant lawyer daughter to manage her life. But a confused woman wouldn't have noticed the discrepancies. A helpless woman wouldn't have gone out in the cold to dig for the truth. You made a classic legal miscalculation. Dwayne, you underestimated your opponent. I turned back to face her. I want you to leave now, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. Take your briefcase full of lies and your condescending concern, and get out of my house. Mom, you are not thinking clearly. We need to sit down with Oscar and get out. The words echoed in the sudden silence. She stared at me, her mind clearly struggling to process this new reality. The power dynamic, which she had so carefully controlled for months, had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the passive victim in her carefully crafted drama. I was the one holding the script. Without another word, she turned. Her movements were stiff, jerky. She grabbed her purse from the counter, her hands fumbling with the clasp. At the door, she paused and looked back at me, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. You have no idea what you're doing, she said, her voice low and menacing. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret, I replied, is not seeing who you really are sooner. I watched her leave, her sharp heels clicking a furious rhythm on the wooden porch. The slam of her car door was a satisfyingly final sound. As the silver BMW disappeared down the mountain, the adrenaline that had been coursing through me began to fade, replaced by a profound and bone-deep exhaustion. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The cabin was silent again. But this time, the silence was different. It was the silence of a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. The air was thick with unspoken words and shattered trust. I looked at the recovered treasures on my table, and for the first time, I allowed myself to cry. Not the soft, weeping grief for my husband, but hot, Angry tears of betrayal for the daughter I had lost. How could she? The question hammered at my soul. The little girl who I had taught to read, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose heartbreaks I had mended. How could she look me in the eye and lie, while systematically dismantling the life my husband had worked so hard to build for us? The rage had given me strength for the confrontation. But now, in the quiet aftermath, a terrifying new reality began to sink in. Dwayne's cruel words about my financial incompetence echoed in my ears. Maybe she was right about that part. I didn't know anything about taxes or escrow accounts. I looked around the cabin, at the stone fireplace Cody had built, at the view of the lake he had cherished. How could I possibly afford to keep this place on my own? Dwayne had emptied the accounts. I had no idea how much was left, if anything. The panic that had been a low hum for the past 2 months roared back to life, threatening to swallow me whole. She had left me not only heartbroken but destitute. The thought was paralyzing. I sat there for what might have been an hour, frozen in place, the magnitude of my situation crashing down on me. Then, a new thought cut through the fear. You underestimated your opponent. I had said those words to Dwayne, but had I believed them myself? It was time to find out. My hands were shaking again as I looked up the number for our local bank, Mountain Trust. I dialed, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and determination. Mountain Trust Bank. This is Diana. How can I help you? The voice was warm and familiar. Diana? It's Heather Patterson, Cody's wife. Heather. Oh, my goodness. It's so good to hear your voice. Though I'm so sorry for your loss. Cody was one of our favorite customers. Such a good man. Her genuine sympathy was a balm on my raw nerves. Diana had been our loan officer for years. She had helped us refinance the cabin and had always treated us like friends, not just account numbers. Thank you, Diana. I need some help. I need to understand the state of our accounts. There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her professional warmth was tinged with caution. Of course, Heather. Let me just pull them up. Can you verify your mother's maiden name for me? I gave her the information, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. I could hear the quiet clicking of her keyboard. The silence stretched on for a little too long. Heather, she said finally, her voice low and serious. Are you sitting down? Yes, I whispered. Okay. The joint checking account you shared with Cody currently has a balance of $287. The number didn't compute. It was impossible. Cody's landscaping business had been successful. We were comfortable. Not rich, but always secure. What? No, that can't be right. There should be thousands in there. There were several large transfers made over the past 8 weeks to an account held by Dwayne and Oscar. The most recent one, for $28,000, was yesterday. Yesterday, while I was lying in bed, consumed by grief. They were draining the last of our shared money. What about the savings account? I asked, my voice barely audible. The emergency fund. Another pause. More clicking. That account was closed last week. Heather. The entire balance of $75,000 was transferred out. $75,000. 40 years of careful saving. Birthday checks from relatives. Small bonuses from Cody's business. All diligently put aside for a rainy day. And the rain was here. But the umbrella was gone. And the life insurance? I dreaded asking. But I had to know. Cody had a policy. It was supposed to be deposited directly. It was, Diana said. Her voice now filled with a quiet anger on my behalf. A payment of $312,000 was received 6 weeks ago. It was in the account for less than an hour before it was transferred, in its entirety, to the same account held by your daughter and son-in-law. The phone felt slick in my hand. The room tilted. $312,000. Gone. All of it. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Dwayne hadn't just stolen some money for expenses. She had stolen everything. My past, my present, my future. Heather? Are you still there? Diana's voice was full of concern. Yes. I breathed. She had signing authority. Cody added her to the accounts a few years ago. For emergencies. I see that. Diana said grimly. He trusted her. Heather, I'm going to be very direct. What you're describing, the pattern of withdrawals, the timing, the complete draining of assets immediately following a spouse's death. This looks like a textbook case of elder financial abuse. You have grounds to press charges. Serious ones. Criminal charges. Against my own daughter. The thought was monstrous. Unthinkable. And yet, what she had done was monstrous. I don't know what to do. I stammered. The fight draining out of me. Replaced by a vast, empty despair. I have nothing left. You have the house. Diana said gently. The property is in your name. Free and clear. According to our records. She can't take that from you without your signature on a sale document. But for how long? I thought of the property taxes Oscar had mentioned. The maintenance. Without any money. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a liability. A ticking clock counting down to foreclosure. Dwayne hadn't needed to steal the house. She had just stolen my ability to keep it. She had won after all. After I hung up with Diana, I just sat there. Hollowed out. The sun was high in the sky now. Streaming through the kitchen window. But I felt nothing but cold. I was 62 years old. A widow. And utterly, completely broke. Dwayne's parting threat echoed in my head. You're going to regret this. Seemed she was right. A sharp knock on the front door made me jump. My heart leaped into my throat. Dwayne. She'd come back. Maybe with Oscar this time. To finish the job. To force me to sign the papers that would make it all final. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The knock came again. Softer this time. Hello? A woman's voice called out. It wasn't Dwayne. I saw the smoke from your chimney. Just wanted to make sure everything was all right. Slowly, hesitantly, I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. A woman about my age stood on the porch. Her silver hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had kind eyes, etched with the fine lines of someone who had both laughed and cried a great deal. In her hands, she held a casserole dish covered in foil. My hand trembled as I unlocked the door. I'm sorry to bother you, she said with a warm, gentle smile. I'm Olivia Field. I live just down the mountain. I saw your daughter leave earlier. She seemed upset. I know grief is a heavy burden to carry alone. I thought you might like some company. Or at least, some dinner. She held out the casserole dish. It was such a simple, neighborly gesture. But in that moment, after hours of the deepest betrayal and despair I had ever known, felt like a lifeline. I looked at this kind stranger, and my carefully constructed wall of composure crumbled into dust. A sob escaped my lips, and I couldn't stop the ones that followed. Olivia didn't flinch. She didn't offer awkward platitudes or look away in discomfort. Instead, she simply stepped forward, put the casserole dish down on the porch railing, and wrapped her arms around me. I leaned into her embrace, a complete stranger, and sobbed. I cried for Cody, for the daughter I'd lost, and for the terrifying, empty future that stretched out before me. Let it out, she murmured, her voice a soothing balm. Let it all out. When the storm of tears finally subsided, I was left shaky and spent, pulled back, embarrassed. I'm so sorry, I whispered, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I don't know what came over me. You have nothing to be sorry for, Olivia said, her eyes full of a deep, knowing sympathy. She picked up the casserole. Now, How about I put this in the oven and we have some coffee? You look like you could use a friend right about now. I hesitated for only a second before nodding and stepping back to let her in. Her presence immediately filled the cabin with a warmth that had been absent for months. She moved around my kitchen with a quiet, confident energy, finding the coffee filters and mugs as if she'd been there 100 times. She didn't ask questions. She just listened to the silence, letting me find my own words. I found myself watching her as she worked. She was tall and lean, with the wiry strength of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. There was an earthiness to her, a sense of being grounded and unshakable, that I envied with every fiber of my being. As she set 2 steaming mugs on the kitchen table, her gaze fell upon the jewelry and deeds still laid out like an offering to the god of betrayal. She didn't pry, but a flicker of understanding crossed her face. Sometimes, she said, her voice gentle, the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. That simple, profound statement was the key that unlocked the words I'd been choking on. She's been stealing from me, I heard myself say, the confession spilling out in a rush. My own daughter. Since the day after the funeral, she's taken everything. The bank accounts, the insurance money, everything. Olivia didn't look shocked. She just nodded slowly, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup, and listened. I told her everything. The stacks of papers I'd signed without reading. The decluttering weekends. The missing watch. The real estate agent. The confrontation that morning. Her condescending justifications. The phone call with Diana at the bank. The empty accounts. The terrifying realization that I was broke. When I finally finished, the story hung in the air between us. Ugly and raw. I felt stripped bare. Exposed. I expected pity. Maybe even a hint of judgment for having been so naive. Instead, Olivia's expression was one of grim recognition. My son tried something similar after my husband, Tom, passed away, she said, her voice quiet but laced with steel. Not outright theft. Not at first. It was subtler. He called it helping me manage things. He started by taking over the bill payments. Then he suggested I add his name to my accounts, just in case of an emergency. I stared at her, a chill running down my spine. It was the same script, the same playbook. He talked to me like I was a child. Olivia continued, her eyes distant with the memory. He'd explain basic financial concepts in a slow, loud voice, as if I were senile. He'd bring his wife over, and they'd whisper in the other room about my state of mind. They were building a case, brick by brick, that I was no longer competent to manage my own life. They wanted control. What did you do? I asked, my voice a whisper. I fought back, she said, and the steel in her voice was unmistakable now. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. He was my son. I loved him. But I realized that the woman he was trying to erase, that was me. Tom's wife. A woman who had run a household, raised 2 children, and co-owned a successful business for 30 years. I wasn't helpless. I was grieving. And they were using my grief as a weapon against me. Her words resonated so deeply they made my bones ache. I wasn't helpless. I was grieving. How did you fight? I documented everything, she said, her focus sharp. Every condescending conversation, every financial statement he tried to hide from me. And I hired my own lawyer, a bulldog of a woman named Mary Hannity who specializes in elder abuse cases. The moment my son received a letter from Mary's office, everything changed. The condescension turned into panic. The concern evaporated. Did you press charges? Olivia shook her head. I didn't have to. The threat was enough. I got my financial independence back. But the relationship, that's broken. Maybe forever. That's the price you pay for standing up for yourself. Sometimes, you have to choose between being a mother and being a person. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Two women united in a club no one would ever want to join. The shared experience was a strange and powerful comfort. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the first mother to be betrayed this way. And if Olivia could fight back, maybe I could too. She called me incompetent, I said, the memory of Dwayne's words still stinging. She said someone had to be the adult. Olivia let out a short, bitter laugh. Classic. That's their justification. They have to diminish you to make their own actions seem noble instead of predatory. My son told his sister I was having delusional episodes about money. It's a power play, Heather. Pure and simple. Her practical, no-nonsense assessment of the situation was like a splash of cold water. She wasn't just offering sympathy. She was offering clarity. She was giving me a name for the insidious game Dwayne had been playing. There's something else you should know, Olivia said, her expression turning serious. About this property. What did Dwayne tell you it was worth? I don't know. Not much. She said it was an old cabin. That the upkeep was expensive. She made it sound like a burden. Olivia leaned forward, her eyes intense. Heather. Tom sold his workshop and the 5 acres it sat on last year. It was a mile down the road from here. No lake view. No mature landscaping like you have. He got $600,000 for it. The number hung in the air, seeming to shimmer. 600,000. But that's... And that was before the new wave of people started moving up from the city, looking for mountain retreats. She continued, pressing her advantage. A lakefront property like this one, with the privacy you have, the 2 lots, you're not sitting on a burden. You're sitting on a gold mine. Close to $1 million. I'd bet. $1 million. The room seemed to spin. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Dwayne wasn't just stealing my savings. She wasn't just trying to get her hands on a quaint family cabin. She was trying to steal $1 million asset. The sheer scale of her greed was staggering. She has to know. I whispered. More to myself than to Olivia. She's a lawyer. She brought a real estate agent here. She knows exactly what it's worth. Which means this isn't just a family squabble over an inheritance, Olivia said, her voice grim. With that kind of money involved, this is grand larceny. A felony. I stared at the deeds on the table. They were no longer just papers representing my home. They were a symbol of my power, my independence, my security. And Dwayne had almost succeeded in stealing it all. The last vestiges of maternal softness in my heart hardened into resolve. I need a lawyer, I said, my voice clear and steady for the first time all day. I need to talk to that woman you mentioned, Mary Hannity. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. It was the smile of a seasoned warrior welcoming a new recruit to the fight. She pulled out her phone. Mary doesn't take crap from anyone. Especially not from entitled children who think their parents' assets are their own personal retirement fund. As Olivia looked up the number, my phone, which had been sitting silently on the counter, buzzed. It was a text message from Dwayne. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up. Mom, I know you're upset. I'm coming back up tomorrow morning with Oscar. We are going to sit down and work this out like a family. Please don't do anything rash before we talk. The arrogance. The command disguised as a plea. The assumption that she could still control the narrative. That she could still manage me. She's coming back tomorrow, I told Olivia, reading the message aloud. With her husband. Olivia's expression sharpened. A show of force. The 2 of them against you. They're hoping to intimidate you. To wear you down until you agree to their solution. Will it work? I asked, a sliver of the old fear returning. Olivia looked at me, her gaze steady and unwavering. That, my friend, is entirely up to you. So let me ask you a question. What do you really want here? Not what you think a mother should want. What do you? Heather Patterson. Want? The question hung in the air. For so long, my wants had been intertwined with Cody's, and then with Dwayne's. What did I want? I thought of the fear I'd felt when the bank accounts were empty. I thought of the condescension in my daughter's voice. I thought of the cold dirt under my fingernails as I dug up my own history. I want her to understand that what she did was wrong. I said slowly. Truly. Deeply wrong. Not just a mistake, but a choice. A cruel one. And if she doesn't? Olivia pressed gently. If she continues to believe she was justified? The possibility was very real. Dwayne had shown no remorse, only anger at being caught. Then I want justice, I said, the word feeling solid and powerful on my tongue. Real justice. Not just a quiet family settlement that lets her get away with it. I want consequences. Good. Olivia nodded, a look of profound respect in her eyes. Because Mary Hannity can get you justice. But you have to be sure. Heather. Once you set the legal wheels in motion, there's no going back. The family you had is gone. You'll be building something new in its place. I looked out the window at the mountains, standing silent and strong against the afternoon sky. They had witnessed my joy with Cody and my deep sorrow at his loss. Now, they would witness my rebirth. There's already no going back, I said. Dwayne burned that bridge when she put a shovel in the ground. A sense of purpose, clean and sharp, cut through the remaining haze of my grief. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting to things, to death, to sorrow, to my daughter's manipulations. I was about to act. Olivia wrote down Mary Hannity's number on a napkin, her handwriting firm and clear. Call her first thing in the morning, Olivia advised. Tell her I sent you, and tell her everything. Don't leave out a single detail, no matter how small or embarrassing it feels. Lawyers like Mary build their cases on details. My phone rang again. Dwayne's name flashed on the screen. The sound, which hours ago had filled me with dread, now felt like a minor annoyance. I met Olivia's gaze across the table, and she gave me a small, encouraging nod. I pressed the green button and put the phone on speaker. Mom? Dwayne's voice was tight, strained. The forced brightness from her earlier visit was gone, replaced by an urgent, barely controlled panic. We need to talk about this. No, Dwayne, I said, my voice as calm and steady as the mountain outside. We don't. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could hear her breathing. Quick, shallow sound. She wasn't used to being denied. The world, for most of her life, had bent to her will. Please, she said, and the word sounded foreign coming from her. Pleading was not a tool she often used. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But you're not seeing the bigger picture. Oh, I think I'm seeing it with perfect clarity for the first time, I replied, the truth of those words resonating deep in my chest. For instance, I spent some time this afternoon educating myself on local property values. The picture is very, very clear. Another pause. This one charged with a new kind of tension. Whatever the real estate agent told you, he was just giving a rough estimate, she said quickly. A little too quickly. The market is volatile. You can't trust those numbers. I don't have to, I said. I trust my new friend, Olivia Field. Her husband sold a comparable property last year, and the market has only gone up since then. But you already knew that, didn't you? That's why you were in such a hurry to get me to sign the listing agreement. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of surprise. It was the silence of a chess player who has just had their queen captured. When she spoke again, all pretense of concern had vanished, replaced by the cold, cutting edge of the lawyer she was. You have no idea what you're doing, she said, her voice dropping to a low, intimidating tone. You can't manage $1 million asset alone. The taxes, The insurance. The liability. You'll lose it. You'll lose everything Dad worked for. And it will be your own fault. There it was again. The narrative of my incompetence. But this time, it didn't sting. It sounded desperate. It sounded like a threat from a bully who has run out of tricks. Maybe, I said, shrugging, though she couldn't see me. But that will be my decision to make. Won't it? And my mistake to live with. Not yours. This is insanity. Her voice cracked with frustration. You're throwing away your future out of spite. A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. My future? You mean the future you had already stolen? The bank accounts you emptied? The insurance money you funneled into your own accounts? Don't you dare lecture me about financial security. Dwayne, you are a thief. And you're not even a very good one, since you got caught. Olivia, sitting across from me, covered her mouth to stifle a laugh, her eyes shining with approval. I was protecting those assets. Dwayne yelled, her voice ragged. I was managing them during your period of instability. Was burying my grandmother's ring in the woods part of your asset management strategy? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Tell me, as a lawyer, is that a standard fiduciary practice? I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head as she searched for a plausible lie. A new angle. She found none. I'm done listening to you, Dwayne, I said. My patience gone. I listened to you for 2 months while you robbed me blind. No more. Mom. Wait. I hung up. The silence in the kitchen was profound. It felt clean. For months, Dwayne's voice had been the soundtrack to my life, cajoling, commanding, condescending. Now, there was only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. She'll escalate, Olivia said, her expression serious. When a predator is cornered, it gets dangerous. She knows she's lost control of you. Now she'll try to take control of the situation in other ways. What do you mean? Emotional blackmail is the next step, Olivia explained, ticking the points off on her fingers. She'll threaten to cut off all contact. If you had grandchildren, she'd threaten to keep them from you. She'll try to turn other family members against you, paint you as the unstable, vindictive one. I don't have any other family, I said. Not really. Just a few distant cousins. It's always just been me, Cody, and Dwayne. Then she'll go legal, Olivia predicted. If she can't convince you you're incompetent, she'll try to convince a judge. She'll file for a conservatorship. She'll claim you're a danger to yourself and your own finances. The idea was terrifying. My own daughter, standing up in a court of law, trying to have me declared mentally unfit. Could she do that? She can try, Olivia said grimly. My son did. He got my doctor to write a letter expressing concerns about my memory. It took me 3 months and 2 independent psychiatric evaluations to prove I was perfectly sane. It was humiliating. It was the ugliest part of the whole ordeal. You need to be prepared for that, Heather. She will use your grief, your age, every vulnerability she can find, against you. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another text. I steeled myself and looked. It wasn't from Dwayne. It was from Oscar. Heather, Dwayne is distraught. You've misunderstood everything. We were only ever trying to help. Please, let's talk before this goes any further. For Cody's sake. For Cody's sake. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost laughable. Using the memory of the man they had betrayed to try and reel me back in. Oscar. The charming, smiling accomplice. The man who had held the shovel. Oscar's trying the good cop routine, I said, showing the message to Olivia. She snorted. He's just as guilty as she is. His name is on the accounts, too. In legal terms, he's a co-conspirator. He has just as much to lose. just as much to lose. The thought was sobering. I wasn't just fighting my daughter. I was fighting a team. A husband and wife who had planned this, executed it together. The depth of the betrayal widened, deepened. Oscar had called me mom at their wedding. He had promised Cody he would always look after Dwayne, always be a good son to us. Instead, he had helped his wife gut my life. If I pressed charges, I asked Olivia, the question tasting of metal, what would actually happen to them? Olivia's expression was unsparing. Best case for them? They pay everything back, with penalties, and lose their professional licenses. Dwayne would be disbarred. Oscar would be fired and blacklisted from the financial industry. Worst case? With the amount of money involved, this is a major felony. They could face prison time. Prison. For my daughter. The little girl with pigtails and a scraped knee. The thought should have made me sick. It should have stopped me in my tracks. 6 months ago. It would have. But sitting there, in the wreckage of the life they had tried to demolish, I felt only a cold, hard sense of inevitability. They destroyed my life first. I said, my voice flat. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her hand was warm and strong. Then you need to make sure your case is ironclad. We need to get everything to Mary Hannity before Dwayne and Oscar have a chance to start hiding assets or manufacturing evidence. For the next hour, Olivia and I were a team. We transformed my kitchen table into a war room. We took high-resolution photos of the jewelry and the deeds from every angle. We scanned every bank statement Diana had emailed me, every document I could find. Olivia, surprisingly tech-savvy, helped me set up a secure cloud folder and upload everything, creating a digital fortress of evidence. As we worked, a strange feeling settled over me. Purpose. It was a feeling I hadn't had since before Cody got sick. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a grieving widow. I was a plaintiff, building a case. By the time Olivia left, promising to return in the morning before Dwayne and Oscar arrived, I felt like a different woman. I had a lawyer's name. I had a mountain of evidence. And I had a plan. I ate the chicken and rice casserole Olivia had brought, my first real meal in days. It tasted of nourishment, of friendship, of hope. I went to bed that night not in the cold, empty bed of a lonely widow, but in the command center of a woman preparing for battle. The phone rang one last time, just as I was drifting off to sleep. Dwayne. I didn't even look at the screen. I just rolled over and let it ring. The sound no longer a summons, but a distant, irrelevant noise. Let her talk to my voicemail. Soon, she'd be talking to my lawyer. Tomorrow, she and Oscar would arrive expecting to find a broken woman they could easily manipulate back into submission. They were in for a terrible surprise. They thought they had left me with nothing. They were wrong. They had left me with a righteous, burning anger. And that, I was beginning to realize, was more than enough. The morning arrived crisp and clear, the autumn sun casting long shadows through the pines. It felt like a day for new beginnings, or perhaps, for final endings. I was up before dawn, fueled by a potent combination of coffee and resolve. I dressed not in the soft, shapeless sweaters that had become my uniform of grief, but in a pair of tailored slacks and a crisp blouse, the kind of clothes I used to wear when I accompanied Cody to business dinners. It was armor. Olivia arrived at 9. As promised, a thermos of fresh coffee in one hand and a folder in the other. Mary Hannity's office called back. She announced, her eyes bright with a warrior's glee. She'd already heard about your case through Diana at the bank. She's moving some things around. She can see you this afternoon at 2. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Today? She said, and I quote, "This is exactly the kind of arrogant, predatory nonsense I live to dismantle. I think you'll like her." Olivia opened her folder on the kitchen table. "I also did a little more digging for you. Public records are a wonderful thing." She slid a piece of paper across to me. It was a copy of a mortgage document. Dwayne and Oscar took out a second mortgage on this property 6 weeks ago. $40,000. They forged your signature. I stared at the document, a fresh wave of ice-cold fury washing through me. It wasn't just theft anymore. It was fraud. A federal crime. They hadn't just been draining my accounts. They had been actively leveraging my assets. The home Cody and I had paid off 20 years ago. To fund their lives. This is the nail in their coffin, Olivia said, her voice grimly satisfied. Forgery is hard to explain away as asset management. Mary will have a field day with this. At precisely 10 o'clock, I heard the sound of 2 cars coming up the driveway. A convoy. Dwayne's silver BMW, followed by Oscar's sleek black Mercedes. They parked side by side, a united front of wealth and intimidation. I watched from the window as they got out. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace. Dwayne clutched a thick manila folder. Oscar carried a polished leather briefcase. They had come prepared for a boardroom negotiation, armed with paperwork and financial projections. They were about to walk into an ambush. Showtime, Olivia murmured, taking a seat at the kitchen table, looking as calm and immovable as the mountain itself. Remember, Heather, you are in control. This is your home. They are here at your sufferance. Don't let them set the tone. I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady as I poured myself a final cup of coffee. Dwayne didn't knock. She used her key, striding in with an air of entitlement that was breathtaking. Oscar followed a step behind, closing the door with a soft, definitive click. They both stopped dead when they saw Olivia sitting at my table. Their carefully rehearsed 2-on-1 strategy had just been upended. Mom, Dwayne said, her voice tight with annoyance, though she tried to mask it with a bright, false smile. I didn't realize you had company. Olivia Field, my neighbor and friend, I said, my tone cool and level. You remember Oscar? Of course. Olivia gave them a thin, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dwayne, Oscar. This is a private family matter, Oscar said, stepping forward. His investment banker charm was on full display, but it didn't quite cover the irritation in his eyes. Perhaps Mrs. Field could give us some privacy. Perhaps Mrs. Field could stay right where she is. I countered, my voice sharper than I intended. Unless you'd rather conduct this meeting in the presence of my attorney. I'm sure she could be persuaded to drive up. The word attorney landed in the room like a grenade. Dwayne flinched, her knuckles whitening as she gripped her folder. Oscar's smile faltered. There's no need for lawyers, Dwayne said quickly. We're family. We're here to work this out. To find a solution that protects you. A solution that protects me? I let out a short, incredulous laugh. Is that what you call this? I slid the copy of the forged mortgage document across the table. Is taking out a fraudulent $40,000 loan on my home your idea of protection? Oscar's face went slack with shock. He looked at the document, then at Dwayne. Silent, panicked accusation passing between them. He had clearly assumed I would never uncover this. Heather, I understand you're upset, he began, falling back on his practiced, soothing tone. Grief can make us see things in ways that aren't entirely rational. Don't, I snapped, the word cutting through the air like a whip. Don't you dare patronize me. Don't you stand in the house my husband built and call me irrational after you helped your wife bleed my bank accounts dry and forge my name on a legal document. The time for you to talk, Oscar, is over. He recoiled as if struck. Like Dwayne, he was accustomed to deference, not defiance. Dwayne stepped in, her lawyer's instincts taking over. She tossed her folder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. You want to be rational? Let's be rational. Let's talk numbers. She pulled out spreadsheets and financial statements, laying them out in a neat, intimidating grid. This is the reality of your situation. Mom, the property taxes on this cabin are $42,000 a year. Insurance is another $10,000. The average monthly utility and maintenance cost is $2,500. That's over $80,000 a year, just to keep the lights on and the roof from leaking. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. A prosecutor delivering her closing argument. Without Dad's business income, and without the savings that we have been protecting for you, your Social Security income won't even cover the taxes. You can't afford this house. That is a fact. We are not trying to steal it from you. We are trying to save you from being buried by it. It was a masterful performance. The numbers were real. The logic sound. 6 months ago, it would have terrified me into submission. I would have gratefully signed anything she put in front of me, believing she was saving me. But I wasn't the same woman I was 6 months ago. You're right, I said calmly. Dwayne and Oscar exchanged a look of triumphant surprise. They thought they had one. It's an expensive property to maintain. That is, you assume it generates no income. I reached into my own folder and pulled out the research Olivia and I had done. I laid the printouts of vacation rental listings right on top of Dwayne's spreadsheets. Comparable lakefront properties in this area rent for an average of $1,000 a night during peak season, I said, my voice gathering strength as I spoke. Even with a conservative 50% occupancy rate, this property can generate over $180,000 a year in rental income, more than double the cost of its own upkeep. The color drained from Dwayne's face. In her arrogant rush to liquidate the asset, she had never once considered its potential as a revenue stream. She saw a house to be sold, not a business to be run. But that's not all. I continued, pressing my advantage. I slid another document across the table. It was a letter from Mary Hannity's office, drafted late last night and emailed to me this morning. My attorney found something very interesting when she did the preliminary title search. Something you, in your supposedly superior legal wisdom, completely missed. They both leaned forward, their eyes scanning the page. The mineral rights, I said, savoring the words. When Cody and I bought this land in 1987, the mineral rights were included in the sale. It seems a natural gas company has been trying to secure leasing rights in this valley for the past 2 years. They've made a standing offer to property owners, $200,000 as an upfront signing bonus, plus royalties on anything they extract. I watched their faces as they processed the information. I saw the dawning horror in their eyes. They hadn't just been trying to steal $1 million house. They had been trying to steal a multi-million-dollar windfall. Their greed, turned out, had been bigger than even their own imaginations. Oscar sank into a kitchen chair, the fight visibly draining out of him. He looked pale and sick. But Dwayne's panic was quickly morphing back into rage. You can't manage a rental property, she hissed. You can't negotiate a mineral rights lease. You'll be taken advantage of. You'll be cheated. Maybe, I said. But I have a very good lawyer to help me. And unlike you, I'm willing to learn. Mom, please, she said, her voice dropping, shifting to one last, desperate tactic, the emotional appeal. Think about what you're doing. To your family. I'm your daughter. Are you really going to destroy my life? Oscar's life. Over money? There it was. The final, pathetic gambit. To reframe her crime as my sin. To make me the villain of the story. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the phone. You destroyed this family. Dwayne, I said, my voice cold and final. You destroyed it when you decided your mother's grief was a business opportunity. You destroyed it when you forged my name. You destroyed it when you stood in my home and called me incompetent to justify your own greed. Her face, for the first time, crumpled. The lawyer, the strategist, the predator, all vanished, leaving behind the face of a terrified child who had finally, irrevocably, been caught. If you press charges, I'll be disbarred. I'll lose everything. Yes, I said. You will. I looked at Oscar, who was staring at the floor. A broken man. Both of you. We can pay it back. He whispered desperately. All of it. With interest. We can make it right. No, I said. You can't. I turned my back on them and looked out the window at the silent, watching mountains. Some things can't be made right. Some things are broken forever. This is one of them. I turned back, my gaze sweeping over both of them, seeing them now not as my daughter and son-in-law, but as what they were, criminals. My appointment with Mary Hannity is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. She has already reviewed the evidence. She tells me the district attorney's office will be very interested in the wire fraud, mail fraud, and forgery charges. She expects they will issue warrants for your arrest by the end of the day. The finality in my voice, the calm certainty, seemed to suck all the air out of the room. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't a negotiating tactic. It was a statement of fact. A sentence being handed down. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The cool mountain air rushed in. Get out of my house, I said. They left without another word. Their expensive briefcases and folders of useless spreadsheets forgotten on my kitchen table. I watched them walk to their cars, their shoulders slumped in defeat. As they drove away, kicking up dust on the gravel road, I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt a vast, quiet, and profound sense of peace. The battle was over, and I had won. After the sound of their cars faded, the silence that settled over the cabin was absolute. It was a clean, pure silence, washed of all the tension and deceit that had filled the air just moments before. Olivia rose from her chair and walked over to me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? She asked softly. I thought for a moment, expecting a storm of conflicting emotions, grief, anger, regret. Instead, I found a surprising calm. Free, I said, and the word felt truer than anything I had said in years. For the first time since Cody died, I feel completely free. Olivia smiled. A genuine, radiant smile. That's the feeling of taking your power back. Heather, it's better than any money in the bank. She began gathering the scattered folders and spreadsheets left behind by Dwayne and Oscar. Let's get this garbage off your table. You have a new life to plan. We worked together, clearing away the last remnants of the battle. We threw their meticulously crafted financial projections into the trash. We stacked the evidence for Mary Hannity in a neat pile. As we worked, the cabin began to feel like mine again. Not a place of loss and betrayal, but a place of strength and sanctuary. My appointment with Mary Hannity that afternoon was everything Olivia had promised. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found immensely comforting. She didn't waste time with condolences. She got straight to the point. I've reviewed the documents you sent, she said, her voice crisp and efficient. The bank records, the forged mortgage, the title search. Frankly, this is one of the most brazen cases of elder financial abuse I've seen in a long time. Your daughter and her husband have been both arrogant and sloppy. That's a gift to our side. She walked me through the legal process, explaining the charges in clear, simple terms. Wire fraud for the electronic bank transfers. Mail fraud for any documents sent through the postal service. Forgery for the mortgage. Grand larceny for the sheer value of the cash and assets, and a specific state charge for financial exploitation of an elderly person, which carried enhanced penalties. The district attorney is going to love this, Mary said with a grim satisfaction. It's clean. It's well documented. And it has a sympathetic victim. They will likely arrest them both within 48 hours. Arrest them. The word still had the power to send a jolt through me. Handcuffs. A police car. A jail cell. For my daughter. Mary must have seen the flicker of pain in my eyes. Her expression softened slightly. Heather, I need you to be very sure about this. Once I make this call to the DA's office, this train is not stopping. They will likely offer your daughter a plea deal, but it will almost certainly involve prison time. Their lives, as they know them, are over. Are you prepared for that? I thought of Dwayne's face as she'd left, the shock, the fear, the disbelief that her perfect, controlled world was about to be shattered. A part of me, the mother part, recoiled from the image. But then I thought of Cody's empty watchbox. I thought of my grandmother's ring buried in the cold dirt. I thought of the terror I'd felt when I learned the bank accounts were empty. She made her choices. I said, my voice firm. Now she has to live with the consequences. I am prepared. Mary nodded, her professional mask back in place. Good. Then let's get to work. The arrests happened faster than even Mary predicted. The next evening, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains, I received a call from a Charlotte number I didn't recognize. It was a reporter from the local newspaper. Mrs. Patterson? My name is Ben Carter. I'm calling about the arrest of Dwayne and Oscar Thorne, prominent lawyer and investment banker, arrested at their multi-million-dollar home this evening. It's quite a story. We have a source that says the charges were brought by you, her own mother. Would you care to comment? The news hit me like a physical blow. I knew it was coming, but the reality of it, off a reporter calling, of it being a public story, was dizzying. No, I managed to say. No comment. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. I turned on the television to the local Charlotte news station. And there it was. A picture of Dwayne and Oscar. A smiling, glamorous society photo from a charity gala flashed on the screen. Then, it cut to shaky cell phone footage, clearly filmed by a neighbor. It showed Dwayne, her face a mask of stone, being led out of her manicured front door in handcuffs. Oscar followed, his head bowed, a jacket pulled over his cuffed hands. I sank onto the couch, the remote slipping from my fingers. It was real. I had done this. I had brought the full weight of the law down on my only child. The image of Dwayne's face, not the lawyer, not the thief, but the daughter, was seared into my brain. The sight of her humiliation sent a pang of ancient, maternal pain through me so sharp it took my breath away. For a moment, I was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of doubt. Had I done the right thing? Was this justice? Or was it a vengeance that had gone too far? The phone rang again. This time it was Olivia. I saw the news, she said, her voice quiet. Are you okay? I don't know, I whispered, the tears I'd held back finally beginning to fall. Olivia. I saw her in handcuffs. My little girl. She is not a little girl. Heather. Olivia said, her voice firm but kind. She is a 36-year-old woman who committed multiple felonies against her own mother. Do not let your love for the child she was blind you to the reality of the woman she has become. What you are feeling is grief. You are grieving the daughter you thought you had. And that's okay. Let yourself feel it. But do not confuse it with regret. Her words were a lifeline. She was right. The woman in handcuffs was not the child I had raised. That child was gone. Lost somewhere along the road to ambition and greed. I was grieving a loss that was, in its own way, as profound as losing Cody. In the weeks that followed, my life settled into a strange new rhythm. The legal case moved with a speed that surprised me. Faced with the mountain of undeniable evidence, especially the forged mortgage, Dwayne and Oscar's high-priced lawyers advised them to take whatever deal the prosecutor offered. The deal was harsh. They both had to plead guilty to felony financial exploitation. They were required to pay back every single cent they had stolen, plus penalties and interest, totaling nearly $500,000. Their professional licenses were permanently revoked, and they were each sentenced to a minimum of 3 years in a state prison. My days were punctuated by calls from Mary Hannity, updating me on the proceedings. But in between, there was a quiet, empty space to fill. The cabin, which had been a stage for so much drama, was now just a house again. I had to learn how to live in it alone. Not as a widow, but as a single woman. I started small. I took Cody's clothes, which I had been unable to touch for months, and donated them to a local church. It was painful, but it was also a necessary step. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, moving my armchair to face the window and the lake, instead of the empty space where Cody's chair had been. I started cooking again. Simple meals for one. Rediscovering the pleasure of creating something with my own hands. Olivia became my constant companion. We'd take long walks along the lake, our conversations meandering from the legal case to gardening tips to memories of our husbands. She taught me how to identify the local birds by their songs. She showed me which of the wild mushrooms were safe to eat. Slowly, gently, she was reintroducing me to the world I had shut out. One afternoon, she convinced me to drive into town with her to the local community center. "There's a pottery class," she said. "It's messy and frustrating and wonderful. You'll love it." I was hesitant, but I went. I sat at a potter's wheel for the first time in my life, my hands clumsy in the wet, spinning clay. My first few attempts were wobbly, misshapen disasters. I was about to give up when I remembered Olivia's words. "You're building something new." I took a deep breath, centered the clay, and tried again. This time, I didn't try to force it into a shape. I just felt the rhythm of the wheel, the give and take of the clay under my hands. And slowly, a small, imperfect but sturdy bowl began to take form. Sitting there, my hands covered in clay, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Joy. The money from the mineral rights lease came through. A staggering sum that landed in my new, single-signature bank account. It was enough to ensure I would never have to worry about the property taxes or the leaky roof again. It was security, independence, freedom, all the things Dwayne had tried to steal from me. I hired a local contractor, a young man with honest eyes who had worked for Cody years ago, to do some repairs on the cabin. We fixed the porch steps, replaced the old, drafty windows, and put a new roof on the shed. With each improvement, I felt like I was healing the house, and in turn, healing myself. One day, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain. The return address a post office box for the state correctional facility. It was from Dwayne. My hand trembled as I opened it. The letter was short, written on thin, lined paper. "Mom, I don't know if you'll even read this. I know I don't deserve it. There aren't words to say how sorry I am. Not just for what I did, but for who I became. Prison gives you a lot of time to think. And all I can think about is how I threw everything that mattered away for things that didn't matter at all. I was arrogant and I was cruel. I betrayed you and I betrayed Dad's memory. I know sorry isn't enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I have. Dwayne." I read the letter 3 times. There were no excuses. No justifications. Just a stark, simple admission of guilt. I didn't know if it was genuine remorse or just the regret of being caught. Maybe it was both. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer with the other legal documents. It was a part of the story, but it wasn't the end. The end of the story was mine to write. The letter from Dwayne settled in my mind, not with the weight of an obligation, but as a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter that was now truly closed. Forgiveness was a complicated landscape, one I wasn't ready to explore. Perhaps someday I would be. Perhaps not. For now, it was enough to know that the truth, in its own harsh way, had finally reached her. My focus was no longer on the past she had tried to destroy, but on the future I was determined to build. Winter came to the mountains, blanketing the world in a soft, muffling layer of white. The first heavy snow was always a test for the residents up here, a reminder of our isolation and our need for self-reliance. In previous years, the thought of being snowed in would have filled me with a quiet panic, my mind immediately turning to Cody to handle the generator, the firewood, the plowing. This year was different. When the forecast called for a foot of snow, I didn't worry. I spent the day before the storm splitting and stacking firewood, my arms aching with a satisfying burn. I checked the fuel in the generator, remembering the steps Cody had shown me years ago. I went into town and stocked up on groceries, not just necessities, but a few small luxuries: a good bottle of wine, some expensive cheese, a novel I'd been wanting to read. I was preparing not for an ordeal, but for a retreat. When the snow came, it was thick and beautiful. I woke up to a world transformed, silent and pristine. The power went out around 10 in the morning, and without a moment's hesitation, I went outside, fired up the generator, and felt a surge of pride as the lights in the cabin flickered back on. I spent the day by the fire, reading my book, a cup of hot tea in my hands. The silence of the mountain was no longer a symbol of my loneliness. It was a peaceful, welcome companion. I was not just surviving on my own. I was thriving. I was content in my own company, in my own home. As the months passed, the rhythm of my new life became stronger, more assured. The pottery class became a weekly ritual. My lopsided bowls and mugs filled the kitchen shelves, each one a tangible reminder of my ability to create something new from a formless lump of clay. I joined Olivia's book club, a rowdy group of mountain women who drank too much wine and argued passionately about literature. I started a small garden, tilling the same soil Cody had once worked, and felt a deep connection to him, not through grief, but through the shared love of the land. The restitution payments from Dwayne and Oscar began to arrive, monthly checks sent from their prison accounts. Mary Hannity had arranged it so the money was deposited directly into an account I'd set up for a local women's shelter. I didn't want their money, but I could use their crime to fund someone else's rescue. It felt like the truest form of justice. One day in early summer, nearly a year after the confrontation in my kitchen, Mary Hannity called. "Heather, I have some news," she said. "A film production company is interested in leasing your property for a few months. They're shooting a movie in the area and they're looking for a quintessential, rustic lakefront cabin. They're willing to pay very well." The idea was so unexpected. I laughed out loud. "A movie? In my cabin? They'll put you up in a nice hotel in town." Mary continued. "All expenses paid. It's a significant amount of money for what amounts to a 3-month vacation." A year ago, I would have said no immediately. The thought of strangers in my home, in Cody's home, would have been unbearable. But now it just seemed like an adventure. "Why not?" I said, surprising even myself. The film crew arrived a few weeks later, a whirlwind of trucks and equipment and people and headsets. They transformed my quiet sanctuary into a bustling movie set. I watched from a distance for a day, fascinated. As they set up lights and cameras, their movements a choreographed dance of creative energy. They treated the cabin with a surprising reverence, marveling at the stone fireplace and the hand-hewn beams. The lead actress, a young woman with a kind, intelligent face, sought me out during a break. "Your home is beautiful," she said, looking out at the lake. "It has such a peaceful feeling. You can feel the love that was put into it." "My husband built most of it," I said, my voice thick with an emotion that was no longer just grief, but a deep, quiet pride. I took the money from the film company and booked a trip. Not a safe, predictable vacation to Florida, but a 2-week tour of the national parks out west. I had always wanted to see the Grand Canyon, to stand among the giant sequoias. Cody had always said, "Someday, when we retire." But someday had never come for him. I decided it was time to stop waiting. I sent Olivia a postcard from Zion National Park, a picture of a massive red rock canyon against a brilliant blue sky. "You were right," I wrote on the back. "It's a big world out here. Feels good to finally see it." When I returned to the cabin, it was quiet again. The film crew gone. The house was immaculate, exactly as I had left it. But something had shifted. It no longer felt like just Cody's in my house. It felt completely and utterly mine. It was a place I could leave and a place I could return to. It was a home, not a tether. A few months later, another letter arrived from the correctional facility. This time, it was from Oscar. His letter was different from Dwayne's. It was awkward, formal, full of the language of a man trying to make amends as part of a 12-step program. He wrote about his shame, his role in the deception, and his hope that he could one day become a man his parents would not be ashamed of. I filed his letter away with Dwayne's. They were ghosts from another life, a life I was rapidly leaving behind. Their apologies were for them, part of their own journey toward whatever came next. My journey was here, on this mountain, in this new, unexpected, and profoundly satisfying life I was building for myself. One crisp autumn afternoon, 2 years after Cody's death, I was sitting on the porch swing, a cup of coffee in my hand. The leaves on the maple trees by the lake were a riot of red and gold. Olivia was coming over for dinner later. I had a new pottery project I was excited about. My life was not grand or dramatic. It was small and quiet, and it was entirely my own. I thought about the woman I had been, the one who had been so lost in the fog of grief, so trusting and so fragile. I felt a deep, abiding compassion for her. She had been hurt, terribly. She had been betrayed in the cruelest way imaginable. But she had not broken. She had found the shovel. She had dug for the truth. And in doing so, she had unearthed a strength she never knew she possessed. The mountain air was cool on my face. The silence was deep and peaceful. It was no longer the silence of absence, but the silence of contentment. Dwayne had been right about one thing. Someone had to be the adult. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and looked out at the lake, glinting in the afternoon sun. I was so glad it had turned out to be me.